Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Injured Worker Show. Today's topic is going to be, are injured workers stalked by the State Patrol? And I'm here to tell you, yes, they are. And I also want to bring up a question. Is that ethical or moral? So, first off, I want to say welcome to the new studio. It's a work in progress, let's say that. A little spackle and a little light, and we have the guys doing a lot of work here to put this out for you so that the truth can be told about a war on our injured workers and how we got people from both parties allowing this to go on. This war on our injured workers is a top versus bottom issue that we can't get addressed by lawmakers from either side. And we're finding out that we have our state patrol used here in Washington State to try and harm our injured workers rather than trying to help us get the issue addressed that we have some men with pins harming us that live under med tort laws who are harming us with their pins and then never held to account for trying to harm our injured workers. Our state patrol should be addressing that issue and getting that truth told, not remaining silent or covering it up as they're sent to men's homes to investigate them. That the state itself has starved and delayed and denied for sometimes 4 years before they even send the state patrol to investigate them. But in my case, I'm going to talk about that one specifically today. And this is bigger than my case. And that's why I'm bringing it up now, because this was like 3 or 4 years ago when the state patrol came to my home under the pretext that they were here to investigate me because they were of the phone calls and ranting and raving I had done towards some local lawmakers for failing our injured workers, our state lawmakers. So anyways, I said, sure, I'd love to talk to them, and I did, and was more than willing to do so because I wanted to tell them the truth so that they could know that I was fighting for their PTSD rights and PTSD coverage for them as well, which they eventually got here in the state of Washington, but that's a whole nother topic. But I was fighting for their rights as well as my own rights that I was duly entitled to, and at the end, the judge granted me and gave no legal weight to these report that this state fraud SSDI fraud unit had done. And so what I want, my bigger question is, why was the state patrol even sent to my home by that fraud unit to start with when the state itself, the LNI system, had accepted my mental health conditions already? It was acknowledged, and I'd been sent to state doctors who told me that I had these mental health conditions. That was already established in evidence and record. So if they were doing their investigation, why are they sending people men with guns to people's homes that they know have mental health conditions that are already accepted by the state and state's doctors? So that's frustrating to me, number one. And yeah, so that, and not only that, I had herniated disc, which the record clearly showed that the objective medical evidence showed that I had the herniated disc. So the objective evidence showed that was there, and it was only a 10-pound limit that I had. We were never fighting that it wasn't a 10-pound limit. They were trying to send me back to a 50-pound job, and that was the problem and the issue, and not opening up voc services for any other jobs. And this whole problem where we cheated at state level, delayed and denied and defrauded out of vocational services, sometimes years on end, and I'm wondering why the state fraud unit gets sent to these men's homes when the state itself is defrauding these men and delaying and denying them to start with. Why aren't we investigating the fact that these men are having the fruits of their labor robbed by them by doctors and vocational services that are privatized, that are no longer working in the interest of the workers, but working in the interest of the state and the dollar, and they're depriving these men of the fruit of their labor. Anyways, and if my speech is a little impaired, I have to say I've had some dental work that I'm working on, a full mouth extraction, and so we're working on getting some teeth eventually, which I'm hoping Senator Sanders is going to do that with some dentures at some point here, but I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in that because he was supposed to help our injured workers with some minimum federal standards, but he and his people have remained silent on our issue as they fought and lost on Medicare for all for almost 8 years now. As I beg for people like Jason Call in my community, a local high school teacher who also ran for Congress as a Bernie-crat, U.S. Congress, who told me to go away with my injured workers issue. See, we have a whole bunch of people in power on both sides of both liberal and left, right and left, who don't want this truth told, who don't want to get honest about a war on injured workers. So that's why it's perplexing to me when these officers from this fraud unit, after I'd already been through 4 years of hell in the work comp system when it was well established, and also during this same time period, if they had done thorough investigation, they would see that I was also criminally charged and sent to mental health treatment by a state criminal judge in the criminal hearings that I had gone through over doctors, over some harm, over me yelling and screaming at doctors who were lying to deny and hurt me and my care as far as I was concerned. Nonetheless, as part of my criminally court-ordered restitution, or whatever you call it, punishment, was to go to these mental health therapy sessions for another 2 years. And now I also got ordered again to do that since then for another 2 years. So for like at least 4 years, even longer, I was court-ordered by state judges to attend these mental health treatment sessions where they said I had these conditions that the state itself had accepted on the work comp side. So it's egregious to me when the SSDI fraud unit of the state of Washington, I can understand them maybe getting sent out to check on somebody because to check and see if I was cheating or not, but the record clearly showed I wasn't. And when I spent 45 minutes with these officers as they sat on my porch here with their guns pointing, not pointing at me, but right at their chest, right as they're staring down their nose at me, asking me these questions, as they had lied to me, number one, is the reason why they were here. They were here to investigate me to see if I was cheating on my SSDI, which I was not. And so they lied to me and said they were here to investigate me under some other circumstances, which I agreed to speak to them under. But nonetheless, it was based upon a lie, which that's not good to start out a relationship if you're going to be officers along or a badge to try and lie. But nonetheless, they did. But after spending 45 minutes to talk to me on my porch, they had also see me carrying a light bag loaf of bread and groceries, and they told the judge he'd carried in a bag of groceries. He drove his car to the grocery store and drove his car to the school with his wife. His wife went in and got all the groceries, packed all the groceries, except for one bag that he carried in, which was under its 10-pound limit, a loaf of bread. And then they also said, well, he walked to his mailbox and he had a gate. So therefore, he didn't have a bad back and he had no mental health conditions, and so the judge should deny him his SSDI. Luckily for me, the judge said he gave no legal weight to those officers' reports because they didn't have x-ray vision, and they couldn't sniff out whether I had a herniated disc, and they then were not doctors trained in whatever psychology or whatever it is that the mental health people do. So they weren't even doctors. So they were using sniffs and grins and their gut instincts to sit around and say somebody wasn't hurt and harmed, who was actually hurt and harmed, who had mental health conditions, who had verification of those conditions, who has the history of that. And so it's puzzling to me that during their investigation, they didn't investigate any of that. But the part that hurts me the most is they sat here for 45 minutes and talked to me on my front porch, and I'm sure they recorded the call because they were investigating me for the SSDI thing. So why can't they produce that phone call where I told those two officers that members in our community and IME doctor mills are being used to hurt, to harm us, and even officers of the law are being hurt and harmed because back then they didn't have their PTSD coverage either, and these men were being used to shut us down, and even with the presumption for PTSD coverage, you will still use these IME doctor mills and these IME doctors in town that will say no, he doesn't have PTSD coverage, and it will still take these men 3 years of denial and being put through hell before they get told, yes, we're going to cover you with your presumption. So it's frustrating me when I was standing up not only fighting for my human rights through the SSDI work comp system for a state that was cost shifting me off to SSDI to start with, and started me out so that because they didn't want to turn on the vocational services and never did spend a dime on vocational services, and the whole 4 years they would starve me out before they sent the cops to try and camp out on me there. But nonetheless, it does more harm to our mental health. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't resolve anything. The judge didn't put any legal stock in it because he sees right through it. And so this issue needs to be addressed because I'm going back now and processing this with my mental health therapist, and it's being peeled away like an onion, and I'm going back through it. Back then, it didn't bother me too much, and even after the judge said didn't put any stock in their or legal weight into what their investigation had to say. I didn't really think too much more of it to say, except that, oh, good, at least somebody sees the truth here. But then I get to thinking more today about it. I'm going, wait a minute, these are officers of state law, state patrol, who I was standing up and fighting for their PTS coverage, plus my human rights as a human being and entitlements that I would duly work for and was duly entitled to when you looked at all the factors involved in the thing. Besides, because it wasn't just my injury. My father-in-law was worked to death. My dad was also worked to death, not worked to death, but put through hell for 9 years as a child. So there was a lot of traumatic events besides just my on-the-job injuries that accumulated in this cumulative trauma, besides my being a nurse with cumulative trauma from being a nurse and 15 years of working construction before 15 years of nursing. So 30 years of hard labor, basically, played havoc on my herniated discs. And when it came time to be retrained and put back in someplace, they did not want to retrain me and had no intent of ever redoing that. And that's what's egregious at this point. We are starved out by men and cheated by doctors and our HMO and IME doctors, who then hide behind state med, tort, and work comp laws for their crimes against us and have immunity as they wage this war on us. And I told these officers that this is what is going on. They're hurting and harming us and cheating us and fleecing us on our non-catastrophic OJIs because they don't want to cover them no more. And they don't want to give you vocational services no more, so they are trying to cost contain you through their pins, and then they're granted immunity. And the state med boards, you report to them, and they cover for these guys and say this is the standard of care. And that's just what I explained to these men, and it was on their little recording. If they were recording, if they were investigating me, this all should have been recorded. And so what I want to know is, when I spent 45 minutes talking to these police officers, explaining to them how they were being harmed and hurt as well as I am, and they're hurt on the job and not being taken. They did finally get some PTSD coverage, but it's still not all that great yet if you can't get to it and you're hindered from it for 3 years when you're harmed on the job, and nobody will even voc services for something else for you. But anyways, we have a war waged on us if we dare to report our on-the-job injuries today. And when these officers didn't seem to want to investigate the facts, but go with their gut instincts and their sniffs and grins, just like my OCMED doctors wanted to go with sniffs and grins, rather than the objective medical facts like MRIs that they threw in the trash, that I had to take almost 4 years to dig out to finally get, they accepted my, the physical condition to start with. It was the mental health that they had a hard time with. And they would never open up voc saying that you're something wrong with your mental health. But so anyways, that's the problem. Voc, that's a whole nother issue, is being used to shop for a reason to deny it. And they'll say you're too depressed before the injury and after the injury. Not that you're depressed because nobody's opening voc for you and you can no longer go to the 50-pound job that you had worked for and worked your way up to. That was a state job and a good job, that you shouldn't be cheated and fleeced out of voc services to go on to do some other job, especially when you were an employee of the month just 6 months before that at the University of Washington Medical Center. That's why it's frustrating to me when I turn around and have my own state patrol, after 4 years of put through hell and being in the state itself trying to cost shift me off to the SSDI program, that the state itself and the feds then go and even the feds said the states are failing our injured workers, but yet the SSDI fraud unit uses the state patrol to try and shut down and deprive me and rob me, basically, of the entitlements I had duly worked for, some of it on the end of a shovel and a fucking hammer, and the other 15 years wiping people's asses, some of them police officers, state patrol officers at the University of Washington Medical Center. That's why it's very offensive to me when these men felt the need to lie. Not only to me for the investigation, and that's a whole nother matter, police lying to investigate people who they think are lying, and it ends up, the police ended up lying to the SSDI judge. Now I want to know why these two officers from the Washington State Fraud Unit were able to lie to the SSDI judge. Now luckily the judge didn't buy their lies, because they can't sniff out a mental health condition with their noses. And when they don't even look at the facts, the criminal state judge had court ordered me to some of that mental health treatment that they were sitting there, we don't think he has mental health conditions. I'm sorry. You don't get to make that decision, and you do not get to go investigate people. And when those people you investigate tell you they are a victim of systemic patient abuse, and state codified oppression, and you refuse to convey that information onto the SSDI judge, and instead you tell that SSDI judge you don't think he has mental health conditions. At the very least, you could have said he rambles on and he talks a bunch of bullshit that you think is delusional. You could have at least even said that, but no, you felt it was your duty to take down a man who was standing up and fighting for his human rights and his laborers' rights and his patients' rights, and for everybody else's patients' rights, for people who are hurting and harm us in our health care, used as tools and shields while other men rob us of our entitlements, then send men with guns, badges, on behalf of the state of Washington and Governor Jay to say we don't want you to get your Social Security now. And now here's another kicker. I ended up getting a pension from the state L&I judge. Now I've got a lifetime pension in which the state has me take $500 less per month so that my wife will have an annuity, so that when she dies, she was supposed to be paid till she died. Took about 2/3 of what I get till she dies. So basically I'm sold another insurance product here with promises of the future. Yet that same state seems to cost me off to the SSDI feds, where the feds are then used to re-sift through my shit and sniff through my shit every 3 to 7 years to reevaluate whether or not I'm still fucking not upset or not, or mentally fucking oppressed or harmed or hurt, when people are paid to lie, to deny, to hurt and harm others in this community, the entitlements that we've worked for. Now I want the state of Washington to step up here and make some amends for this state patrol fraud unit being used as a tool to rob me of the fruits of my fucking labor by men who seem to want to not be honest, as they were conveyed with the facts and presented with the facts and presented with the evidence that a man before them was being hurt and harmed by others in our community who are hiding behind state med tort laws, who then send them with men with guns and badges to intimidate me at my front door. And I want to know if those men were sent here like they were sent to the man in Canada who was fighting for his injured workers' rights, where they sent theirs like state patrol basically, or whatever it was, but they sent their police, and that man got shot. They sent one police officer, a state patrol officer, to see him, and he had some kind of rabbit gun. I don't do guns, and that's another thing that these officers, if they had done some thorough investigation, would have known that, well, I had these crimes against me. I am not a violent offender. And when I'm gone to jail over all this shit, I am deemed a non-violent offender. A habitual harasser and yeller and screamer, yes. Because when you're oppressed, you yell and scream, and that's what pisses me off about these officers, is I was here telling them that I am oppressed by men with pens who hide behind immunity, and when I yell out and scream and rage in anger over that, you are sent to put me through criminal law. And I also want to know if this was like Canada. Was the state sending those men with guns to my home, hoping that the mental health patient might go berserk and flip out so that they could shoot his ass? This is egregious. This is oppressive. And this shit needs to be addressed here in America. We have a war on injured workers that Senator Sanders for 8 years remained silent about as he ran for office, that Biden for 4 years remained silent about, that Trump remained silent fucking about. No, sir, ladies and gentlemen, the jury is here, the judge is here, and the sheriff, the labor sheriff, is here. And he's here to tell you he was hurt and harmed. And the facts are there. And I have the mental health here, and I'm still court ordered. Here it is, years afterwards, and I'm still court ordered to these mental health fucking treatments, which I want to say bad, because if you're going through this, do seek some mental health treatment. That's for sure, because you're going to need it. Because this is a psychological warfare that is waged upon you by the state itself, and it needs to be addressed because it's oppressive. Anyways, want to take you to the show, and I'm going to try and keep things a little cleaner and a little nicer, and that's why we got a new studio here. And through song and dance and a little political romance, and help of my mental health therapist, criminally court-ordered, I'm trying to get my voice heard in a nicer, calmer way and explain to you folks how the war was waged on me and my family, and how my father-in-law was worked here to death here in the state of Washington as a Mexican immigrant, and nobody really gave a fuck about that either. And he spent 25 years in this country working and laboring. And so it's frustrating to me that he was able to be worked to death in the state. We proved that, but nobody gets held to account for working that man to death to start with. Just like these two police officers who seem to want to lie to the judge and tell that judge that they don't think he has any mental health conditions, when you're not professionally qualified to establish that, officers. And the sad thing that it makes me so upset the most is there's some great officers out there who put their lives on the lines for the rest of us, who are getting hurt on the job and not being taken care of, and these seem two assholes who would go sniff up their asses rather than go and look at the fact that why was that man out of work for 2 years, being starved out, delayed, denied, and defended against, rather than them giving him some mental health treatments, rather than them opening up some, whatever other treatments that we need, physical and everything else, or operations that they're denying them, or pain meds, another one that we get denied. No, sir, ladies and gentlemen. When we can send officers of the law to end up a gun and a badge, to camp out on injured workers who are fighting for what they were duly entitled to when the judges established and sifted through all the fucking facts, objective and subjective. Not just sniffs and fucking grins like my Ahmed doctors are trying to fuck me with to start with, who do not get held to account. And that's a problem. We catch them stealing our candy bars. Nobody gets in trouble for stealing candy bars. We get handed back our candy bars and we get 7 years of back pay with SSDI and even workers' comp, but my SSDI judge, I think it was, said he would have went all the way back to almost 11 years, almost to 2011, that he would have went all the way back to when I first got hurt on the job if he could have, but the law prohibited him from doing so. We don't get punitive damage, yet we are being oppressed, harmed, and basically Nazism used when men with pens are able to harm us with immunity, then men with guns and badges come out and try to say you're dirty and you're lying, when it turns out that I wasn't a liar here, they were. And why do you still have your job, that badge, and that gun, when you lied to the judge and you're part of a fraud unit? We need honest people running that unit. Now if you can't do your job, let me go do it then. Oh wait. Nobody will do that, will they? Because I have mental health conditions, officer. Isn't that correct? But you didn't want to tell that to the judge, did you? No, sir. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are oppressing us in this nation. You are starving injured workers out, and you are purging us to the streets, and then plugging your noses as you walk over us. This shit needs addressed. Senator Sanders needs to speak up. President Biden needs to speak up. And we need some minimum federal standards on the table so these states don't rob us of our vote services, put us through hell for years on end, and then on the SSDI end, if we win, send cops to us, and after we do win, send us a ticket to work that they starved us out and should have gave us back 8 years ago to start with. No, sir. You don't get to rob us of vote at the state level and then put our noses through shit for years on end and only pimp us out with no fucking punitive damages. You owe me punitive damages, state of Washington, and so does the federal government at this point. You don't get to rape and defraud me of the fruits of my labor by men with pens and immunity who hide behind badges and fucking guns. This shit is oppressive. Have a great day. And like I say, I'm going to try and clean it up, not be so obsessed and whatever else you want to call it is, but I'm sorry. When you do this to men in this country, we need to speak up, and this is how we get. And if you aren't like me, lucky, I'm the little pacifist who doesn't have guns. And that's why I say these men should have done a little further investigation into the person they were investigating to find out that he was actually telling the truth. And when those officers felt it was their duty and their moral obligation to go lie to a federal judge, then you don't deserve your jobs, those badges or those guns, and I want them. You didn't give a fuck if I was being defrauded and robbed of my jobs and opportunity in fucking life. Then you shouldn't have your fucking jobs and guns and ability to sit and camp out on other people's yards. Who else are you fucking over in this state that might be telling the truth that you're over to telling a judge that they're lying? This shit needs addressed. Have a great day.